Good to go? Okay. What's that? Yeah, we'll have prayer. Yeah, I'll do the Bible reading first, and then we'll have order prayer. So we're going to be reading out of Luke chapter 14. There's a number of passages. We're going through the Gospel of Luke, and this week is 14. The passage I chose to go on today is 15 to 24. It's about the feast that was prepared. So Luke chapter 14, verse 15. Now when one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, "Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then he said to him, as in Jesus said to him, "A certain man gave a great supper and invited many, and sent a servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, 'Come, for all things are not ready.' But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused.' And another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to test them. I ask you to have me excused.' Still another said, 'I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come.' So that servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in there the poor, and the maimed, and the lame, and the blind.' And the servant said, 'Master, it is done, as you commanded, and still there is room.' Then the master said to the servant, 'Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who are invited shall taste my supper.'" Dear Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have to gather together and worship you and celebrate and look into your word and how you encourage us today. Father, we pray that our minds, our hearts, and our spirits will all be in tune with your Holy Spirit to speak to us and allow him to speak to us, so that each one of us can grow a little more, a little bit closer to you, and a little bit stronger in our faith walk with you. Bless our time together now, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. We had a little bit of a discussion last week after the sermon, and I just want to clarify one little thing. The question was asked, well, do you think that God does perform miracles? No, God does perform miracles, but he performs them in his time and in his way, and he's not at our beck and call to sit there and perform any miracle we ask him or tell him to do. He does it in his time and his way, and it may not be the miracle we're expecting, but he does perform miracles, but it's in his time and in his way. So we can't command him to perform a healing and have him expect him to automatically, he might heal, but then again, the healing may not happen in a miraculous way. God works in his own ways, and he's not there for us to command and tell. He's us there to petition, and he's there for us to petition and plead and ask him for his gracious blessings upon us. And that may come in forms of miracles, it may come in other forms, but God does work miracles, but it's in his way, not in our way. So that said, let's get into today's sermon. We're looking at Luke 14, as we said, and the feast, the banquet. They just had, before this being said, about how we'll be getting into heaven, and one says, well, it's going to be great for somebody to, won't it be great to have this banquet and be able to feast at the table in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus answered him with his parable. It's kind of like saying, okay, well, let's first of all look and see what's going to happen. In the first case, we have there's 3 sets of guests that get invited to this feast. The first set of guests are invited, and they've been invited for a long time. And the closest relationship I would be looking at this to is the religious leaders and the influential people of that day. They're the ones, in a lot of cases, if you want to look at today, it would be the religious leaders, once again, the wealthy, the what do you call them, ones that, philanthropists, the one that give lots of money to the poor and help the needy and all this sort of thing. Those would be the ones that would be invited to this banquet. And this day would have been the Pharisees and the Levites and the scribes and the wealthy people of Israel. And so what we're having here is, man makes the supper, and the first guests sit there. I don't think they really realized the honor of the position that they were being offered. They had the first shot at being in God's favor and being with God for all eternity. That's what this banquet represents, is feasting for all eternity, in eternity with God in heaven. That's the feast that's prepared for us. They didn't realize it. And as a result, many of them, we have 3 here, but obviously there was more than 3 that were invited. These are just a sampling of what's going on and the excuses that were being made. The first says, I bought this land and I gotta go check it. If you want to relate that today, I have my wealth, I have my investments. I got to make sure those are a bigger priority to me than sitting there and being in a right relationship with God and being in fellowship with God. I got to sit there and look after all this stuff first. That's a bigger priority. I'd rather be doing that than coming to your table and feasting, because your place is probably going to be boring. Just a bunch of politics is going to get talked around the table and all this frustrating, boring stuff. I'd rather be looking at my land and my investments and seeing how wealthy and how well off I am. That's the first one. That would be what we have today. Same thing with today. You got some people, their wealth and their investments, and checking that out and being involved with that is much more important than coming to fellowship with God's people. The second one is, well, I got these 5 set of oxen that I got to go try out. Well, both of these things are rather foolish. It says, one, before you buy the land and invest it, you probably have gone and checked on it first to see whether it was worthwhile investing. And the same thing with the auction. Before you pay money for 5 yoke of oxen, you're probably going to go and try them out to see if they're worth the value and the value that the person is asking for them. But this one here says, I'm going to go check them out. And basically what that would relate to in today's day and age is, I've got my job, I've got my occupation, and that's more important than coming to church. I got to sit there and if you're in the farming industry, I got to go sit there and pay more attention to my calves and my crops and whatever else it is than come in fellowship with God. You see, our faith isn't strong enough to trust that God is going to look after whatever it is we think is a bigger priority than coming to church. I got to go to the office and do those, especially not so much now because we've got until June to finish them off. But I got to get taxes done. I got to work on those tax returns for the people, all the people that they're due at the end of the month, and I got a backlog. I got to go in and work overtime and get my tax prepared and get them prepared for all my customers and my clients. Or I got this divorce settlement, or I got this, if you're a lawyer, or I got to go cook in the restaurant, or I got to go do this. Whatever your occupation is, that's a higher priority than God. And that's what we see here is these people. Occupation and work was more important than coming and fellowshipping with God. And then we had the one, well, I just got married, so I can't come. We have to realize in this day, married life was a big priority for the Jewish people, because when an individual got married, if they were in the army, they got a year off. They didn't have to go to battle or go to war or anything like that. If they're in the Lord's army, and in a lot of cases if they're serving somewhere else, they got a year off to get their wedding and their marriage established and set up and spend the time with their wife or their husband. They had the time given off to do that. But here we have the celebration that, okay, well, I could come with my wife, we can have a celebration here. But no, his relationships are more important. Physical and earthly relationships are more important than a relationship with God and a fellowship time with Him. We see in the next portion of this thing where it comes along, if anyone comes to me, verse 26, and does not hate his father, mother, wife, and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. This is Jesus expanding on this statement here. Your family does not take precedence over me. Your earthly relationships are secondary to your relationship with me. I have to come first. Me, God says, I am first in your life. Everything else is secondary. Not that you're not supposed to focus and have a good relationship with your wife and your children and your mother and father, but the only way we can have a truly good and beneficial relationship with them is to have a right, proper relationship with God first. Because then He's in the midst of our relationships. And our relationships can prosper and flourish when He is in the center of both of them all. So first of all, we have to have a right relationship with God. Family and self and everything else comes second. So these guests all bowed out and says, we can't come. So what does He do? Well, there you go, the banquet's done, all this food's wasted. No, He sits and says, okay, go into the rest of Jerusalem. Go find my other people, the rest of the chosen people. Maybe they're not as worthy as the first ones were. Not that our own righteousness makes us worthy, but go out and find more people to bring in. So I'm going to have this banquet, and I don't want this to go to waste. So they go into the streets and the alleys and everything else and bring in all the lame, the disfigured, the deaf, the blind. They bring them into the fellowship. God opens it up God's willing to bring in and show us his loving kindness for us, and that we don't have to be perfect and pure. God wants to have that relationship with us, so he brings the others in to fill up the table. Still, the table's not full. Verse 23 the Master says, "Go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled." So what we see here is an invitation goes out even to the Gentiles, to those who are not of God's chosen people. We have up until this time God's chosen people, the nation of Israel, were God's chosen people throughout history since Abraham. Through the whole thousands of years that they had there, they were his chosen people, and they had first priority to the relationship with God. We see that once again here. His people had the first chance to be in a relationship with him. Many chose not to be in a relationship, so what he does, he opens it up to the rest of the world. And we are blessed because of that. We as a Gentile people are blessed to be in a relationship with God because the Jewish people rejected him. I mean, these people would have been stunned. It would have sort of like been somebody come up to me and say, "Well, the Queen of England is having a special banquet and you're now invited to go to it." Well, me? Why me? What have I done to deserve being invited to this fancy banquet? Many of these people were probably the same way. And the answer is, we didn't do anything to deserve this. This is the grace and the mercy, the grace of the master of the house, inviting us to have that fellowship with him, not because we've done anything special or spectacular or worthy, but because he wants us to be there and fill the table. It's because of his grace and his mercy that we're invited to the table, not because we're special, not because we've done anything spectacular, but simply because he wants us there. And so, to be invited to this event, for us nowadays, it's like, what's the big deal? I mean, we're all God's chosen people because we've been under that doctrine for centuries, for 2,000 years. But at the time of Jesus speaking of this, to sit there and say, "I'm going to invite the Gentiles in to have fellowship at this feast in heaven with us," for most of the Jewish people, the Israelis, it was like, "Are you kidding me? Those guys are scum. They don't even worship the proper God." And Jesus sits there and tells them, "I'm bringing them in because you rejected me. I'm bringing them in, and they're going to have fellowship with me." He wants his banquet table filled, and he will invite all who believe in him to come in. We go to Rome. I want to look at Romans chapter 11. It just came to my mind because there's Jesus talking to the disciples, "I'm the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me will bear much fruit." If we go to Romans chapter 11, starting in verse 17, I think it's Romans 11. Yeah. 17. Let's start in 16. "For if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root is holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them became a partaker of the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. But if you do boast, remember that you do not support the root, but the root supports you. But we'll say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said. Because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be haughty, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he may not spare you either." You see, we're in there because we believe in what God did. The other branches were broken off because they didn't believe in the Messiah, Jesus Christ. They didn't believe he was the Messiah. He was some other imposter. He was some guy usurper trying to lead people astray, is what the main attitude of the religious leaders of the day were. Was this guy is a usurper. He's not the real thing, because our understanding of who the Messiah is nothing what this guy is doing. And that's where we fall short, because we try to understand and comprehend the fullness and the completeness of God and who he is. And we can't begin to even fathom that. If we have a God that we can fully comprehend and fully understand, he's not much of a God at all. I've been reading this book, or I've read this book, not God Knows My Way, And it's called Not God Enough. And it simply says so often we sort of custom make the God to fit our purposes, to make us feel that we can't do that. God is so much bigger than we could possibly imagine. And by His grace, we are grafted into the branch, to the tree, the root of David, as it's called. That's what Jesus Christ is, the root of David that springs up from the stump. We are grafted into that tree by God's grace and His mercy because we believe in who Jesus Christ is. Not because we're anything special or better than the original branches. We're the wild branches that God mercifully grafted in so that we can have life in His Son, Jesus Christ. And that's what it's all about, is our relationship and how we look at Jesus Christ and where He stands in our life and how He stands in our relationship. If we look at Him with a proper perspective and have the proper, I'm not worthy of this gift, Father, but thank you for giving it to me anyway. Then we have the right relationship to be working and allow God to work with our lives and use our lives in the way He sees fit to have our lives minister to the people around us, because that's what we're here for. We're here to be a testimony and a witness to those around us. And we're here because of God's good grace, who opened the gates for us through Jesus Christ. And He opened it for all mankind, not just for His chosen people, but for all of humanity. Because of Him, we're allowed to feast at the banqueting table in all eternity if we put our faith and believe in Him. And that's as simple as it is. It doesn't get any simpler than that. We need to have faith in Jesus Christ. And as we walk with Him, the next part of Luke talks about how we need to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow Him. It'll be a hard journey. It's not going to be a bed of roses like some people promise us. It's not going to be happiness and healthy and wealthy. There's going to be a lot of trials and a lot of difficulties. And the world's going to hate us. Why? Because Jesus says, the world hated me. You're following me. You're my disciples. So because they hated me, they're going to hate you because they don't understand my teachings, and you're following Him. But He will be with you through it all, give you the strength to go through the trials and be victorious in the trials, and grow stronger in your relationship with Him. That's the joy of the Christian life, is knowing that you're not walking this world all alone by yourself, no matter how miserable the circumstances may be around you. We know, I'll be with you even to the ends of the earth. Matthew 28, the way Matthew ends off his Gospels, that was that promise that Jesus says, I will be with you even till the ends of the age. That's what we have, as we trust in Him. Dear Father, we thank you that you did open up the feast and the banquet for each and every one of us to come to. And the prerequisite is simply by trusting in your Son, Jesus Christ. We can't earn our way in, we can't do enough good work, we can't give enough money, can't do anything except for believe in your Son, Jesus Christ, and what He did for us in our lives. Father, help us to humble ourselves and realize I can't do it on my own, but I can only do it through your blood and the saving grace of you and your Son, Jesus Christ. Help us to have those humble hearts. We ask these things in Jesus' name.